5 and 6, like today.
Donc après l'enseignement de Khenpo Wangdu.
So after the Khenpo Wangdu's teaching.
Et mercredi matin, le dernier jour, entre 10h et 12h30.
And Wednesday morning, the last day, between 10 and 12:30.
Et donc, nous aimerions savoir, pour pouvoir organiser la salle correctement, combien de personnes dans cette salle seraient intéressées par cet enseignement. Merci de bien lever la main clairement.
And so just to have
Cette
an idea,
1, 2,
we could have a show of
3,
hands for those who are
4,
interested in
5,
joining
6,
the meditation
7,
sessions.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay. Une vingtaine. Donc, cet enseignement se déroulera dans la salle d'études. La salle qui se trouve en bas dans le... Comment dire? Il y a une espèce de carré de comment on appelle ça? Vous suivez les panneaux. Hein. C'est marqué salle d'études. Il y a un carré là où on peut déjeuner dehors. Et à droite du carré, quand on arrive, il y a ce qu'on appelle la salle d'études.
So it's in the study hall. It's just near the dining hall, opposite where the tables and benches are to eat outside.
Voilà. Et donc, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à venir nous voir pour les poser.
If you have any questions, don't hesitate to come and
plus
ask
particulièrement
Jean-Guy
moi.
about the program.
Voilà. Merci de votre attention.
Thank you.
Sonji chuda tsuja chun ala shonja pada dani shasunj daki jaso jibi sananchi dola penja Drapa shu sonji chuda tsuja chun ala shonja Gijaso jibe sanaji Drapa shu sonji chuda tsuja Shuncha padra dane shasa chu daki jusoji Rabai shoy sonji chu da soja chona la shuncha Pincha sonji rabai shoy senjen tanje dewa don devi jan Dunga do dunga ki jatong trawa chachi dunga me be dewa Nirin chodong nyakta Tonya chenpo la nipa chachi Paden tsawi lam Dagi shuo pime den yu te Kadrin chenpo goni Tsado so Nyaya Ta Dela penkin Tsoma la Hane Tsanruta hidele sikiwa insi
Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. I wish you all a warm welcome here.
Tani tatri nga tso nga ta kansekr. Tendri yana jini go ni ta chu nyan to chu hia teres.
The subject that we'll be looking at together is the subject of dependent arising, the 12 links of dependent arising.
Tani ta nga tso chu nyan chu hia sia tina tso ta nga tso chu nyan hia shebi kala sanan tong tong te nga tso namju ta deba si chike de yores. Ta deba te hachong ka chenpo isares.
Nous avons
When we begin a teaching, we are used to talking about the importance of the motivation that we listen to the teaching with. When we are listening and during the practice of the teaching, considering motivation and confidence, which is really of primordial importance.
Tani nga tso jinsen hibi to ni deba semrao. Jinsen mahina yo monde semrao tanda hia yores.
Trust and confidence appears on the basis of knowing the reason for things, understanding and knowing the functioning of things. When we do not know the cause and the way of functioning of things, then we might have a kind of confidence, but we would call that blind confidence or trust because it lacks the power of study.
Namju nga tso kecha shede ta jinsen hibi to ni deba te ta deba yapo chire. Monde te ani daga chanchi yapo res ni namju hie yo mares. Namju shida hie yo mares.
et donc
Thus, we place greater importance on trust or confidence in terms of reasoned trust or confidence, one that is based on knowledge of things, based on study. On the other hand, blind trust or confidence is not highly valued in this context.
Ngi sana ani jinsen hibi to ni deba leru shina yapo re te jinsen mahina yo monde zamchi nga tso sen la yong ru shina de yong yue den chenpo yo sar ting dus.
mais cependant
However, personally, I think that yes, it is very good if we have trust and confidence, tepa, in Tibetan. Sometimes we translate this as faith. It's good if we have trust and confidence based on knowledge and study, And nevertheless, even if our trust is more blind trust, I personally think that this is also valuable. There's also great quality in this.
인생 히비톤이 대바티 대용매 몽데 대용매 소나 아니 것도 추 년시 시나오레 라마 진자나요레 타나지 내치고이 소나요 시라 세노나 초아 레이 말세
Parce que mieux
Because it's better to have confidence that is blind, one that's not based on knowledge of things, than not having confidence or trust at all. If there's no confidence whatsoever, if this dipa is not present, if there's no confidence, then whatever activities we may undertake, whether we're going on a pilgrimage, whether we're listening to the teachings of the Dharma, whether we're studying, then there's not really benefit, I think.
ngaronan chana that's nyonyuyores nyonyuyos
et cela
And I'm telling you this based on personal experience. I have a bit of experience with this subject.
nga tombo concept tombo beniyaka jagala leni dikala jinsen hibitoni 대파심가 개요 말했어. 가스는 고츠 말했어. 로종신이요 말했어. 요 말에도 이나요 니 세노라 몸대 휴친 뭐 지어랬어. 대여드 지 라마 진자나요레 네치 고인 수나오레 아니 추지드나요레 지 셈바 땡니 될지 초안다 쪼안다지 가완다지 레이드스.
This is my experience. For example, when I left Tibet to go to India, I didn't know how things were. I didn't go to India with full knowledge of what was waiting for me. Despite this, I had this blind trust, confidence, and nevertheless, it was very useful, beneficial. When I went to India, regardless of what activities I was doing, whether it was meeting lamas or going on pilgrimage or studying or practicing the Dharma, there was a benefit from this, even though it was blind confidence that led me through this.
진생 히비톤이 대바데 절수시라 말레 텐라 차온디깔라 지 추지드나요 하모노이 지 세노나 가와 조와 초와 텐데 메든기 네치 고이 수나요 네타선자 온디깔라요 하모노이 지 세노나 가촌다라 지 조안다 텐데 용야메바 텐데 니 동시 연구도스.
Today, we can see this tendency towards blind confidence disappearing. More people... not sure about this. There are people who are moved or motivated by blind confidence. So this blind or spontaneous confidence is diminishing, but then there also aren't very many people with confidence based on knowledge. Thus, the activities of the Dharma, pilgrimage, meeting lamas, receiving their blessing, in fact, people no longer have much enthusiasm for this. And even if they do it, they don't necessarily experience this joy or inner enthusiasm from it.
진생 히비톤이 대바이나 인디 진생 마히나요 몬데 잠치요나 아니 추드야라 하정 펜도 첨부 연구도 있어요.
c'est pourquoi
This is why I think that, of course, the best is practicing the Dharma based on understanding the Dharma and studying it, etc. But if this isn't the case, if we practice simply because we are inspired and because we have this kind of blind confidence, we are inspired and we wish to do things, then this is also excellent and it leads to great benefit.
논추 논마 해온데 대파 세대한테 뭐저 전주야 전주 세한테 공란때니 용그레 세온데 담바야 추드비큰 담바야 담바라 때니 용그레 담바 세한테 공란때니 용그레 대파라 때니 용그레 자와 대파라 투디여레스 기다 시겨레스 전주 공란때니 용그레 세온데 담바야 담바라 때니 전주 용그레스 tin damba te konlan tene yongre se ondi debala tene yongre se jetson toso choma chawa te debala thudi yores te deba mena ta damba yong mare damba mena chendu yong mare chendu mesa te chudde ya kono lekashia debala gi mare se to ayo mare se
L'aspiration.
Aspiring to the Dharma, being inspired, wishing to practice the Dharma, comes from perseverance, comes from developing tsundru, perseverance or joyful enthusiasm. And where does this perseverance come from? It comes from nipa, confidence or trust. So we can see that, in any case, confidence, trust, is the basis for everything. If confidence, dipa, is present, then tsundru, perseverance, will appear. And then this will incite us to practice the Dharma, will nurture our aspiration. On the other hand, if there is no trust or confidence at the basis, at the root, then there's no inspiration for practicing the Dharma. We won't have enthusiasm, we won't wish to do this. And so here, tsundru, perseverance or joyful effort, what is it? It is enthusiasm for accomplishing virtue. It's predisposition for accomplishing virtue, for carrying out virtuous, beneficial actions. If this enthusiasm for virtue is not present, then we won't practice, then we won't dedicate ourselves to virtue. And at this point, then Dharma practice is not possible.
Et donc c'est pourquoi
explaining the importance of confidence seems important to me, and so I've begun with this. Because it is the basis of our practice of the Dharma, it is what will lead us to practice the Dharma. And so to come back to the main subject that we will look at these next few days, we'll be talking about dependent arising. There are, we can say, two types of dependent arising. The first is the basis of dependent arising of the afflictions, and the other is what we call inverse dependent arising, and we'll explain what it is.
kani nyomo shuk tendril simta tehe yures ngushiati.
The one that we'll talk about primarily is the first one. The basis of dependent arising of all afflictions. This is what we'll focus on in the next 3 days.
Tendril sidiatela namji ngozo tendri yala chini. Ta tendri yala chini te heya, nyeya, heya, tendri shegubike gupa on jansen karere sena. Tani jikunju demba tong riu dunga demba nyimbo ngazo ngo yabo chaya chede he yores.
Why are we talking about the 12 links? What is the purpose of the teaching on the 12 links of dependent arising? Its purpose is to help us understand and better integrate, to know better, to know the truths of the noble beings better. And among these truths, particularly that of the origin of suffering and the truth of suffering.
Kani nyomo shok tendril he ondu. Tani jakunju demba riu dunga demba nyimbo te ngontre. Condition ngazo hako yore se ondu. Tani kani nyomo shok tendri tela lunjunk kani nyomo shok tendri he tongchi. Ludu goni kani nyomo shok tendri sin ni he yores. Demba nyimbote condition hako grsena tani kan nyomo shok tende tela lunjun ko ni chi ludu ko ni chi onde tani jikunju dem.
The truths, notably the truths of suffering and of the origin of suffering, explain or demonstrate cause and fruit, the cause of suffering and the fruit of actions, the fruit which is suffering itself. Here there are two explanations, that of dependent arising in the typical order, and we also find reverse dependent arising. There are two progressions, we could say. One explanation in order, first link, second link, and the other is in the opposite order. These two aspects, the explanation in order and in reverse order, allow to explain these two truths.
La teni nanghin teni mizu sin ma le ondu tani tama shewa la teni gashi simti le ondu ngunzen ya zo kare ngunzen shigersna kunju demba te ngunzen shigores jete la teni riu tendi yongre da se ondu jungunzu sawo shigores.
When the links are explained in order, the links of dependent arising explained in order, then we find the first link, ignorance, which is the basis for appearance of the second link, which is conditioning phenomena, the third, which then leads to the third, consciousness, and leading all the way to the 12th link, aging and death. This progression explains the truth of the origin of suffering. In other words, such a cause will lead to such a fruit.
Gahyo seatin riu chat tsu ngunzun sheni tan de kongla teni yongare se ondi kala tani shewa la teni yongre shewa te kongla teni yongre se ondi sipa Tendri shini yan do ne tama ndaje te kona tene yongre se de mari pala tene yongre se onde ndiu chat tsuk donga den bi chat tsuk ngunzi shigere sto.
Et donc l'explication dans l'ordre inversé.
The explanation in reverse order allows for demonstrating, to explain and to clearly explain where does the fruit of suffering come from. The fruit of suffering. Let's start again. This allows for explaining where suffering comes from. In the reverse explanation, we start from the 12th link, aging and death, which is the fruit, and we work backwards, looking at where aging and death come from. They come from birth. Where does birth come from? How does birth arise? It arises based on the link of becoming, etc. And so we work our way back up the 12 links all the way to the first link, which is ignorance. In this way, we explain starting from the fruit, which is suffering, and we work our way back to the cause, which is ignorance.
Tintinoni ani donga dembate ngoya bon tre on de kala ta donga te message la donga te nga gagdu shibundu yona yapundi senke yo mares chetsanta donga te megdu ten on de pongdu ten on de te donga pon a shepa la ani kunjun sem te pongu yapa jini yak sanatan yorese.
Because, of course, no one in the world wishes for suffering. No one wishes for pain of any kind. No one wants to suffer. So starting from this observation of suffering, which is present, then we'll look for the origin of the suffering. Where does it come from? And in this way, we work backwards through the links of cause and effect, all the way to the first link, to the beginning.
Donga sayade ngusayade pe kachembores. Donga ngusayade pe kachembore deres. Donga nguj mazam sunayena, ane donga pondek lo legi mare. Donga pondek chandok lo legi mare. Donga chandok lo male sunayena, kunju demba ponyak lo zan legi mare. Sanatan kog mares.
Here, it is essential to recognize suffering itself. Recognizing the presence, the omnipresence of suffering is extremely important. If we don't recognize this, if we don't see this, if we don't recognize the presence of it, then we will see no need or reason to abandon this suffering. It's not possible to even have the thought, oh, I need to look for the origin of suffering in order to abandon it, right?
Chayana, tani tata donga mambo chinga zokta donga yembati ngunzi shetege maresi. Te ngunzi shemata ondi kala, tani tindrik donga tin junze jakunju demba ponya ten sanan sandle tege maresi.
At present, we're not really able to recognize our experiences, things, as being suffering. We don't see suffering. We don't see where it's present. We don't see all its different aspects. And thus, so long as we don't see how it unfolds, how it is present, it is not possible for the thought, I want to become liberated from suffering, to arise. The idea, I want to escape or I want to be finished with this. We can't have this thought because we don't see it.
Ani penan tamantea teso yonga zu donga yemba ngunzi shitege mares. Teni pena ara ina ara 통야도서 동하 연바티 문즈시 되게 말했어. 근데 이거 빼는 샤치사나요. 대사니 가서라 동하 연구 여바티 문즈시 되게 말했어. 샤사나요. 동하 연바티 문즈시 되게 말했어. 때 동하 연바 문즈시 마터 온디깔라. 근데 타만 뽕야 알아 뽕야 샤 뽕야 세야 뜻어대요. 연구 여 말했어 레바노. 동하 문즈시 마타나.
Si
So long as we don't recognize suffering as being suffering, then we won't have any wish to liberate ourselves, to become free. And so, concerning various activities we may undertake, for example, smoking, we don't realize the extent to which it is harmful for us. We don't see how it creates suffering. So long as we don't see that this creates suffering, then we won't have any wish to abandon this. In the same way, we may drink alcohol, and so long as we don't see the degree to which alcohol is harmful for us, then we won't have the thought, I need to stop drinking. The same goes for meat. So long as we don't see the degree to which it is harmful for us to consume it, then we won't give it up and say, I'm not going to eat any more meat. So here we see the importance of recognizing suffering for what it is.
아라토야 타만테야 샤사야 든디리테서 제오 픽업슬라 선어 야포도나 자샤자 탐바가 좀 소아 마데바치 연구여레스 마데바치 맞은 동아치 연구여레스 디 동아테 맞은 소토여 말았어 다 니가 지 아라테 타만테 샤사온데가 샤사온데 제르지 조하나 전부질레온데 디 대화친데와 니가 소아 대화친데와 디 소아 대화텔라 휴치어소니 대단 렌치들 동하지 연구여레 때 소기여 말았어 가지고 디 문소온데 가라 디 대소 뭐야 자야 선한테 얘기 말았어
It is certain that these types of activities, smoking, drinking, eating meat, bring about suffering. It is certain, it is for sure. But what happens is that we don't see this. For example, at the moment that we're eating meat, there is a pleasant sensation that is present. But at the same time, in parallel with this, there is suffering. We don't see this other aspect. We're happy, we enjoy doing this, but at the same time that we're eating meat, there's also suffering that's present along with this. They go together.
디칼라 ngazo namju ji karesek danhemo nyebikas soa dewachi teni zunzibo thom bikas ngazo soa dewachi khala hembo sabikas soa dewachi ngu yores tati soa dewatoso ngone tonesana tawna dongha rong red yores ina dongha yamba ngunzu she thage maras ngazo dongha yamba ngunzu she thage maras tati matha ondi kala teni 딘dik donghan junsa jete poya kha sona chan le thage maras danhemu tu ondi kala ngazo soa dewa chungures
And thus, for example, we will hear pleasant sounds, we'll see pleasant forms, things we find pleasing, we'll eat good things that are pleasant, enjoyable to eat. But along with all of these pleasant sensations, there is also suffering that's present. What happens is that we don't see why and how it is suffering. We don't see the suffering in it. And thus, of course, so long as we don't see how it's suffering, there's no chance that we'll wish to escape from it, that we'll wish to abandon the cause of the suffering.
zun zipo chil thong de ngune to ne chowa dewa chil rag du tene ani zun zipo thoya chet zun zipo chila cha ni te thoya chet on chi leka mombo sentene khondo geras khwal tina yo ngune to ne danye mo zun zipo la tene nika chowa dewa lewa te ngune to ne dewa reves ne dewa mare dunga res ne sonji khsun yores ndan dunga papi demba wo dunga demba res la yores.
We enjoy hearing pleasant sounds. Due to this, because we like pleasant sounds, we'll seek out hearing more of them. We'll make a bunch of effort to listen to pleasant musics, pleasant sounds, in the same way we like to see beautiful shapes. We like beautiful shapes, beautiful colors, lovely landscapes, and because we like this, we will make an effort. We'll try to be more in contact with this pleasant object. And this process creates all kinds of suffering. Yes, these things are pleasant. Sounds can be pleasant. The color, the shapes can be pleasant, but if we ask ourselves, is this true happiness? Is there true happiness in this? The answer is no. Shakyamuni Buddha answered this question by saying, no, this is not true happiness. It is the nature of the truth of suffering.
Pena ya loni kamba jendro de bekas tani ton chegres kalikan. Ani lasa mach dewa na chi chowa dewa nda chi yores. Ta ti dewa de nga zo tena ngune dewa chindu tengi yorete. Tapchi yapo shina dewa yongu yomares. Yong kali ma de jarimbo de yong ton che yores. O ya chi lona o dewa nda chi ra yores. Ti karen changres na ani ya loni ton che de ma lasa dewa de bekas dewa chi ra ya te ngune dewa re tende te tanda ngune dewa re yomares kor. Kor karesna dunga ngoti yores ko dewa ngune tone dewa yena katu yena ko dewa yangres chese chi dena ni dena san dena ye dena ko dewa yangar ma to ko dunga ndoya yo mars ko jetso tambo dewa ne ngaso dewa nda chi chogre te to kor tapche sheo de dunga yamba so ya sa te chese chi ni san ge dena dunga yamba ji ni chores ngaso ta ten da ore der ngaso mongchi sa sa chi dewa.
Et donc
Therefore, what we are used to experiencing is not really happiness. In Tibetan, the term used for this is dewa. Happiness, joy, meaning what we experience, we think it's happiness. We think that it's not suffering. We don't think that it's suffering. Khenpo uses an example. When we walk, we'll walk for a certain while, and then at a certain point we get tired, and we will say, okay, I'll take a break. It'll make me feel good. And so during this break, we think that what we're experiencing is happiness, some kind of well-being in terms of a pleasant sensation, and we think that this is happiness. In fact, this is not happiness. It's not dewa because this sensation doesn't last. If it was truly dewa, true happiness, then it would last. It would be present all the time. It wouldn't change. Whereas when we take a break because we've walked a lot and we're tired, we might feel good for a while, but if we stay sitting for too long, then we once again won't feel good. So in this way, it's not dewa.
그 초와 대와 손다오 몸보 지라 오네 돈은 가서 대화를 해. 대등하 임바 원즈시 마트니 딘디 그 동하티 그 제데 뽀야가 선언자는 되게 말했어.
Therefore, given that we don't recognize what's really at work, what's really happening, we don't apply what's necessary to abandon, eliminate suffering. Given that this recognition is not present, that what we experience isn't really happiness, that it's not true well-being, that it's suffering. So long as we don't recognize this, then we won't be able to apply the necessary methods to eliminate it.
That tendika ngazo dongha ngunzi she matabataso, ta ngunzi she thaya. Te ngunzi she thasana, te konla teni yongundu ta onde ten junsa ka jokunju dembat ponya khata koka jinra yorese.
Et donc, l'enseignement...
And thus, the teaching of the 12 links of dependent arising allow us to recognize the process that is at work. What are the different aspects that unfold and that make it so that the fruit of suffering is produced? By going back up through this process, we can understand the origin of suffering. We can see that such and such a thing unfold, that such a fruit, this fruit is produced, and working our way backwards, we're able to see where it comes from, what its source is. This is the benefit of the teaching on the 12 links.
Menkonon royak sano legi mudiwas. Zupo no natsa de hako ondikala ta jini natsande juyak chetla ani menkon roya jini ngaso sano le rogudiwas. Ta natsande legi nga nagidu tsagidu de karisini nagigina je kona tene chen kona tene legi na tente menkonon ro menkononi di jeto chen to menchu shene natsata tawashigidiwas. Tenda uresita.
C'est la même chose.
And the same goes for illness. So long as we don't have the symptoms of this illness, we won't go to the hospital to heal this illness. If we don't have this experience, oh, my head hurts or this other thing hurts, then we won't go to see a doctor and get a treatment. However, when the symptoms manifest, then we recognize it and we can put in place a remedy, a treatment.
Teni nasa no yik dongha te ngunzi she thasona. Teni tin dongha te njunsa ka kunjun penan de cha hedong control nga ja. Ta tumi tsandewa. O ta te ponya la nga tsam betso she. Te pong sona teni jini dongha meya dewa thoya dewa ngune ta jini ra yorese.
Et donc, tant
So long as suffering is not recognized as an illness, or in the same way that an illness is not recognized, we won't put in place what's necessary to eliminate this suffering. On the other hand, when we recognize this suffering in the full extent of how it is present and how it unfolds, then we'll want to practice, we'll apply what's necessary for us, and then true taste of practice is possible, a true experience of something else is possible.
Indukar tang ngatsandi noni konda tendik tendi yana kani nyomo shuk tendi yana chini seondi tene tendi yana chini noni tombu kare heresena ni maripa semke da he yorese.
et donc
Therefore, in this explanation of the 12 links, according to this first explanation, the basis of dependent arising of all afflictions, the first link is ignorance, marikpa.
Tangazo tendi yana chini noni teni tsawa te maripa semke da he yore. Maripa se ate ngunzi yabu she taga ya peka chembore derese.
Et donc,
among the 12 links, this first link, marikpa, ignorance, it is necessary for us to understand it correctly. It's very important to truly understand what it consists of in this context when we talk about ignorance. Here, ignorance is the root. It's really the basis for the unfolding of the other links.
maripa sedeya chindewa. Maripa sedeya te shetong maripa sedeya. Shetong renda. Shetong maripa sedeya te namju ngutsu ta yunol ma ta ondi chuchen tong chunye nimbo gongran ta mhiwa shepik senjun. Chuchen tong chunye nimbo gongran mhiwa shepik senjun momba sam chiye de gres. Oh shetong. Oh shetong se.
donc de manière
In general, ignorance, depending on the context in which it's explained, different definitions are given which allow to consider different aspects. In general, not here in the context of the 12 links, but in general, ignorance is defined as follows. It is a mental event that doesn't know, or that knows incorrectly, the mode of appearance and the mode of being of phenomena.
Ta number chishina chuchen do chunye se la son. Chuchen se de ate do duna kuzu demba sala de yores. Kuzu demba. Chunye se de ate do duna danda demba sala de yores ta. Tombanya.
Here, in the definition we just gave, there are two terms used, the mode of appearance and the mode of being of phenomena. So ignorance is the mental event that incorrectly knows or does not have knowledge of the mode of appearance and the mode of being of phenomena. Here we find these two terms, mode of appearance, which can also be translated as conditioned phenomena or conditioning, and mode of being, which is innate, another translation of innate. So mode of being refers to emptiness, the ultimate truth, whereas the mode of appearance or conditioned phenomena refers to relative truth, the appearance of things.
Kunju demba, lamchi demba semi yore. Dan tambi demba se ati kontana gopi demba yore. Ndo duna demba yembote mhi pashe senju momba sila de yoresta. Shetong mari passe, demba yebo mhi pashe senju momba.
et donc
Thus, ignorance is a mental event which is incorrectly knowing the four aspects of the truths of the Noble Ones. Ignorance is not knowing or incorrect knowledge of the mode of appearance concerns the first three truths. So it's absence of knowledge of the first three truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, and the truth of the path. Ignorance or absence of knowledge of the mode of being of phenomena or innate. What is innate? Then this is lack of knowledge or incorrect knowledge of the truth of cessation.
Senju Momba. Launch Demba, Kunju Demba Mahipa Ship, Senju Momba. Launch Demba Mahipa Ship, Senju Momba. The name Gopi Demba Mahipa Ship, Senju Momba, and Higdua. Senju Momba Mombures, Maripa Mombures. Inayo Maripa Tetsoma Noni. Ta Tendi Yala Jenny nonsense Jipiko, so Maripa te Conre Seate, Tungunzu Shetagresta, Tingunzu Shetagresi. Chita Maripa Mombundua. Tam Maripa Tino ni Tende Yala Jenny nonsense Jipi Maripa te Conre Seate, Tungunzu Tagresi. Demba Yala Mombi Maripandua. Ti Maripa Noni, Tende Yala Jenny nonsense Jipi Maripa te Conre Seate, Tungunzu Shegres.
Et donc, il nous faut comprendre par...
It's important for us to understand. We've discussed the ignorance of the four truths of the Noble Ones, ignorance of the truth of suffering, ignorance of the truth of the origin of suffering, ignorance of the truth of the path, and ignorance of the mode of being of the truth of cessation. So among all of these aspects of lack of knowledge or incorrect knowledge, of ignorance, what is at hand in terms of ignorance in the context of the 12 links of dependent arising?
Yala Jenny nonsense Jipi Maripa said that Zote, Godena Mombi Maripa. Gopi Demba Mombi Maripa Cheris, Tiringunzi Shegres.
Et donc, parmi ces aspects, avec toute la vastitude qu'ils impliquent, l'ignorance dont il est question dans cet enseignement-là est l'ignorance de la vérité de la cessation. C'est-à-dire le fait de ne pas connaître le mode d'être de la vérité de la cessation. Donc la vérité de la cessation parmi les quatre vérités.
Tant Godena Gopi Demba said they are Teyon. Chashena Chani Shechores, Guden said that Telayo. Karsana, Gonzak Dame, Chuj Damet Nihures. Ta Tino Karelegersena, Gonzak Dame Mahipik, Mumba Maripachi, Chuj Damepa Mahipa Shepik, Mahipa, Mombi Maripachi, Maripa Nilegures. Gonzak da mepa hamako ken maripachi. Chuj da mepa hamako ken maripachi ni legres. Ta tende yana chini nonsense chepi maripa se de ate tsuk. Ngone tonet kari tsungunzu shegresena. Gonzak da mepa mhipa. Tende mombi maripa chindewa. Tingunzu shegres ta zo teres ta zo yenamena teres.
The truth of cessation has two aspects. The aspect of the absence of self of the individual and the aspect of the absence of self of phenomena. In other words, actualizing the absence of self of the individual and actualizing the absence of self of phenomena. So here there's ignorance, then there's also the opposite of this. So long as the truth of cessation has not been actualized, then neither the absence of self of the individual nor the absence of self of phenomena have been actualized. So not knowing the absence of truth truly existing in terms of an individual and not knowing the absence of self of phenomena, truly existing self of phenomena, And so ignorance here, in terms of the 12 links, the ignorance at hand is the ignorance of the absence of self, the ignorance of the absence of self of the individual.
Maripa teta kare chagrasena konzak danzan sem zo chagures konzak danzan se ta konzak chingune tonen duiten ota ti konzak danzu yo onde tane nyoda choma tane thlong yores nyoda choma tane yongu yores ta.
Et donc c'est
this ignorance, so long as there is no understanding, so long as there is belief in an individual, so long as there is belief in an individual self, then all kinds of problems will arise. On the other hand, when dissipating the belief in a self will allow for dissipating problems. So from the beginning, when this grasping of a self is present, then this is the beginning of all our problems. Attachment to a self, to I or me, leads to thinking I truly exist, I'm here, and this leads to attachment to oneself, to this I or me, to the existence of this self, and then this leads to all kinds of difficulties, problems, and unhappiness.
Ngone tone nga kare res nan zamo chu sai ke yo mar rag mares rag mare te ina yo nga chu noa la nga sen chi yo ten chi zam de gres ngan zu chi le de gres ta nga sem de zam cha de tene nga la chapi chapa sem chi le ta te chapa le on de kala ta so so magasa to so la dong doma chodong chi le de gres cha ronshu la chapi chapa ron la na pa karmagasa to solo donwa chodong nimbo lo le gres te chodong nimbo lo le chade tane ta lekanda ma da chamatane yongu yoresta.
Based on this grasping of I or me, this thinking that I exist, this self that truly exists, the idea of a self that truly exists, we will develop either attachment to what is pleasant or rejection of what is unpleasant, of what we don't like. And then this is the basis for all kinds of actions that lead to all kinds of problems.
소소 nga sa nga ka che cha chenbu nzan den ke mi yo na soso ka che cha chenbu nzan den ke me chi na ti me te la ani yan da mandra pi kha ani kar sekr nyuda sekro control the chat control nga ja sem na moya pa chi yo yore pa chi ya pu ta na.
Et donc,
if we observe a bit around ourselves, we can see that depending on the amount of attachment there is to this self, then there will be greater or lesser amount of afflictive obscurations or degree of afflictive obscurations that are present, of desire, of aversion, of pride. We can see these things as an indicator of this attachment to a self.
게 미텔라 아니 the control sena tesote te pashi nyungresco.
À l'inverse, quelqu'un
On the other hand, someone who has less attachment toward this self will experience less desire attachment, less anger, less pride, etc.
Te indicala konda tende yana chini ka nonsen te bi maripa se de ate zo nga sen zante be nganzang maripa chindewa o terong ngonzi shikrese.
et donc
Here, in the case of dependent arising, ignorance refers to this aspect. In other words, it is the ignorance that causes us to grasp a self as truly existing. It is grasping at the existence of a truly existing self.
Mombi maripa ton te khona nyala mombi maripa san ton namji yewa tendriwa shegrese yewa shetonte.
de manière générale,
In general, we'll also talk about in general, the teachings present two main types of ignorance. Ignorance of the law of causality, of causes and effects, and the ignorance of the mode of being of phenomena. This is mainly what's at hand in the teachings.
Mombi maripa sen da mepala hamakoni da chi yore tenzanda ya tesoresta.
et donc
So what is the ignorance of the law of causality? This is not knowing the way that karma functions, not knowing how actions, causes, and effects work. What cause leads to what effect. It's not knowing that virtuous actions, for example, will have pleasant fruits or results, and that non-virtuous actions will have fruits that are unpleasant, a result of suffering. Concerning ignorance of the mode of being of phenomena, this is grasping a self where there is no self.
Konanyana mobi maripate munzi shigresi. Tata di niyewa ni hemba lendira mobi maripachi te konanyana mobi maripa. Tende yana chini nonsen te bi maripate te konanyana mobi maripa zo te munzi shigresi.
et donc l'ignorance
Ignorance, in the context of the 12 links, is the ignorance of the true mode of being of phenomena. In this case, this is the second of these two types of ignorance.
Tani mai sawo yewa shigwana tani konzak da mepala da chiyore ten datan zamba. Chu da mepala chuch da yore te datan zamba ni no ni konzak da mepala datan zambi maripa che terong resi.
et donc c'est
This ignorance is what projects, that is the basis for belief in a self. Among the different types of ignorance, here, ignorance in the context of inner dependent arising is ignorance of the true mode of being of phenomena. If we go further, more precisely into this, this is ignorance of the absence of self. This is thinking that there is a truly existing self where there is not. This is absence of knowledge of the mode of being of phenomena. This is what is at hand in the first link.
시den케 맞좀 코아노는 코야가 뉴다 tsoma tsawa de gongza ka damzin senare nganzin bi nganzin senare derong tuderes ta di he 뉴다 시니 아니 뭐좀 코아노는 코야 차송 되는 거 주요res다 차송 되는 거 주요res.
Et donc, c'est
this belief in the existence of an individual, the belief in the existence of a self, me, I, is the root of all unhappiness and suffering. It is the root of samsara. From the moment that we believe that there is I, me, a self that is truly there, that truly exists, that truly experiences things, then this is the beginning of all of these rebirths and experiencing samsara. Different lives, different types of circumstances in samsara.
대진도 시방 콜로신도 시방 콜로디 지마 드나라 지마 데라 파바치 샤치 드진도 딱 로마 간디티 삼 파바 카노니 샤 카노니 들려야 티여스 그래서 난 파바티 다탄디가 다튼 좀비 단즈 마리바 때라 때니 샤 파바 때라 때니 샤치 레기도 마리바 때라 때니 더쳐 차파센트 레기레스 그 차파 때라 때니 아니 동아 드치틴더 들레기도 샤 칸이 들레기도 해동 제서 디거 자와 마리파 쳔비 파파 델라테니 더차 쳔비 자레 델라테니 아니 해동 쳔비코 데 들레기도 텐디티요레스 제서 도드나 마리파 델라테니 마리바세 다튼 쳔비 단자 마리파라 테니 테 로나 차파 론쇼라 차파 텔레 차디 데 옌질라 동아 차도니 보틀레이게 바트마티르스 티스모티.
il y a ce dessin
we often find a drawing of the wheel of samsara, where we can find the different levels of existence. We see it often in monasteries. At the center of this drawing, there are 3 animals depicted: a pig, a bird, and a snake. You may have seen this image. We see the pig is holding, is grabbing the bird in its mouth, and the bird is grabbing the snake in its mouth. So what does this express? It's what we have just explained. The pig represents ignorance. Ignorance which causes us to grasp a truly existing self, which is the root of all suffering, of all of our difficulties. Because due to this belief, then will appear desire attachment, which is what the bird represents. The bird represents desire attachment that appears based on ignorance, which the pig represents, based on self-grasping. And once desire attachment is present, then the next aspect unfolds, that of anger and aversion. Hatred, aversion, rejecting. This is symbolized by a snake in this drawing. And so here we can already see a form of dependent arising where one thing appears based on another. Based on self-grasping, develops desire, attachment to this self, and based on this attachment then develops anger, aversion.
Shaatong Drininka Nyamdeles Tieres. Jetsan Ti Karekigersna Kashika Kipa Kashiki Danza Maripa Teli Nguso De Chaton Hedon Ninka Legres Laires. Kashika Danza Maripa Tela Teni Ngus Leate De Chale Tela Teni Hedon Legres. Kipa Kashika Kanisungisarcena Danza Maripa Tela Teli Ngus De Chato Hedon Ninka Legres. Then the Imbasons at Tig Sandata, Papa Kaniaka, Shaton, Drininka, Nyamdeles, Tires, the Bancolo, the Channels of Tad, the Mandawyers. Keep a his and indeed, that means tamed.
Et donc,
There are certain drawings where we see these three animals, the pig, the bird, and the snake, and we see the pig who's holding on to the bird, who's holding on to the snake. And we have ignorance, which generates attachment, which generates aversion. That's one version. There are other scholars and masters who think or who have explained that from their perspective, the pig, ignorance, is the basis of not one which then leads to the other, but rather both desire, attachment, and anger, aversion appear together. And in certain depictions, we find the same drawing, but instead of having the pig who's holding the bird who's holding the snake, we find the pig who's holding both the bird and the snake in its mouth. So we find these different perspectives in the texts and different traditions of thought.
Karsana Mari Patela Teni Ngus de Chato Hedon Ninka Nyam the Lake Duton, Nyam the Mari Patela Teli Ngus de Chato Hedon Ninka Lake Duton, Yona Mari Patel Teli Ngus de Chala Teni Hedon Lake Duta, so Tapchichina Digures.
dans tous les cas, il est
Regardless, it's good to look ourselves, within ourselves, and see what makes sense. Do we think that based on ignorance, desire attachment unfolds, and then based on desire attachment, hatred or anger aversion unfolds? Or do we see that what we experience is that based on ignorance, both desire attachment and hatred aversion appear? Khenpo says it's good to look for ourselves and carry out a form of research about this. Look into it.
Tagaya Shida Yomares. Soso Tares, Tanandig, the Soso Dep Chaderes. Soso la Maripati Yoyo Pares. Dat Nganzermik, Nganza Maripati. Yoyo Pares. Then it tell a teni, and in the child leg duton. Hedon, the child is leg resita. That did down the terratini, Hedon leg due to Mandu. Yomana ani down the terratini, the child, tini gisa, the child atteni, Hedon leg due. Soso and Yakan, Sonatona, Chishina, tini hakochemros.
Et donc c'est très bien de regarder nous-mêmes.
It's very good to look for ourselves. It's not something that we can only read about in books. The idea is to experience it from within, to carry out this introspection, to look and to become our own book, to look within ourselves and see, based on ignorance, does desire attachment arise first, and then based on this desire attachment, hatred, aversion appears, or rather, based on ignorance, do we find both desire attachment and hatred aversion appearing? It's up to us to look, to carry out this process of introspection within ourselves.
다 건다 짜와테 당즈 마리 빠레데레 딘 참참라 대초도 해동이 뭐 연바 소연서 대선보테 네퍼센트 도노시아테 같이 모레스.
Dans tous les cas, nous allons constater.
Either way, what we can observe is that the root of all this is ignorance. Ignorance is the basis for all of this, and it's up to us to carry out this process of reflection, of inner observation, and see what appears first, or second, or together, etc. In any case, it is important to take time for this introspection.
차동님부터 여차도 다 페나 센첸지 세구나요 센첸지 세나 페나 샨라지 사야라 차니 디 차바텔라 테니 아니 센체 세야 고츠요레스 아니 미엠바지 소소 네바시기도 테야 파나 지 야니 디 디마텔라 마가바샤 동안레니 디 동안텔라 테니 미 파슈판델라 니 추바제야 세야 딘디 용구요레스 제츠 센체 세비 리테요 센체 세비 리친도 레 덴다 이거 레테요 페나 센체 그 샤지라 차니 니 센체 세온데 센체 세비 레조요라 tani miji ka ngala dawa shegi dutin ko magawa nepa shegi dutin matela dawa le ti dawa le wala teni ani matela chi karasegar seya yomena chi chupa jeya lika shegi do lisa do jetsa tindi ke senche sebi le mo pashu pandrin chupa jewa wa sebi le te chodoni motela teni yongu yorasita zawa mari parete ina yo ngusta senche sebi le te ton mo pashu pandrin chupa jewi le nimbo ani ngus kona teni yongu se onde chapa to dawani teni yongu do was.
Et donc,
these afflictive obscurations are, in any case, the basis of many actions. Due to attachment to meat, because we are alive and so we need to eat, we may kill sentient beings to then be able to eat them. Here we can see that attachment leads to the action of killing sentient beings. But this action of killing may also be the result of anger. For example, we may have had a conflict with a person, and this can then result in the act of killing. We can see that there is the act of killing in and of itself, of killing a being, but the reason for this act may be different, may be based on different or varied afflictive obscurations.
Zambi damzun tini tela teni chapa ti damwa chile do ti chadon monsambo tela teni yongu yoresta.
In the end, what occurs is that regardless of the act that is carried out, whether it is virtuous or non-virtuous. In the context of samsara, virtuous actions said to be associated with factors for descent, in other words, conditioned, they all have their root in ignorance. And based on ignorance, then the various afflictive obscurations unfold. For example, as we saw here, attachment, aversion, etc.
Tā ngā tsō dōngā kandri chiyo na yōng, dōngā kandri chiyo na yōng, tsawa maripa te mapōng sōna, tsawa maripa dātan zambi dāngza maripa chandewa, tēt mapōng sōna yōna, tani dōngā kandri chiyo na yōng, koro mepa shide na nika shewa tsāngara mātō, yōngja chegre se la yōresa.
Et donc,
as is explained in the Dharma teachings, regardless of the suffering that manifests, this suffering will continue to manifest so long as the root, the basis of this suffering has not been eliminated. So long as we have not eliminated the root which causes this suffering to manifest, it will continue to appear again and again.
Donc Khenpo dit, je ne sais pas dans quelle mesure...
Khenpo says, I'm not sure if what I explained was very clear. If you like, we have a few minutes. If you have one or two questions to clarify what was said, go ahead and ask. Thank you. I had a question about the example that you gave concerning recognizing things as being suffering. You talked about alcohol and smoking, that I can understand. However, when you spoke about hearing pleasant things or seeing pleasant things, this is a little bit harder for me. Is it because if we see pleasant things or hear pleasant things, then we want to see or hear more? Is it just the fact that we're attached to wanting more, or is there something else in it that is suffering?
Nyeo tu ndi te tuwa la teni nga tsu tsoa dewa chile yores. Tendri nga tsu jela tsoa dewa te ni sachik dewa sila de yores. Sachik dewa tsoa dewa chile yores. Dra nyembo nyemba la teni nga tsu jela sachik tsoa dewa chile yores. Te nga tsu tena ngune tone dewa yin tengi re te dewa re mares. Sachik de ta tsoa dewa chira, tsoa dewa. Ta shibundut. Ta nga zo tingune tone dewa chire tengi ta tela un chapa le gir. Cha. Tsoa dewa tela cha gir. Da nyembo koron dewa re se yimare. Koron tu ra tuwa la teni nga zo jela tsoa dewa chile. Ti tsoa dewa tela ta cha gir nga zo. Tela ngune tone dewa chire ndu ten cha. Ti tsoa dewa te ngune tone tapche shina ta dewa re mare sikir.
En fait, ce qui se passe,
In fact, what happens is not that the sound itself is suffering, It's that when we hear this sound, within us there will arise a pleasant sensation which we mistake as being happiness, when in fact in Tibetan the term zakchik is zakchik dewa, meaning conditioned happiness. Happiness that is associated with factors for descent. In other words, in the context of samsara, what does this create? It creates attachment, and in this sense it is suffering. Because what is experienced isn't really happiness. This same process is what causes us, when we hear an unpleasant sound, to reject it. It's the same process that unfolds. If we manage to recognize that as it is unhappiness in nature, then we will be able to eliminate it, to no longer seek this out, to no longer fall into this, and thus to get out of this way of functioning. Thank you for the teaching. Could you explain in a few words what zakche is?
The Sarchi said that is the Himambores. Young to someone here on the Corona Mini Sapa Gisrumas. Corona Mini or Pena Yende Sachi Res Lagires Pen de. The Sachi in Bijansen here on the Della Mini Natso Jella, the chart here don't control Naja Chigres. Gisrumas ke jashigres. Tende gisruma yonzu te sabchi yenza ke jashigres. Tende chapa shies rumi chu kare yena te sabchi se lagires. That yamu kare yenar.
Donc il y a plein.
There are many ways of explaining what this term zakche means. Which is translated here as associated with factors for descent or conditioned. We could define it here as follows. It is all objects that are susceptible to being a support for afflictive obscurations. For example, a tablet. A tablet can be the support for anger arising, for example. It's a subject of debate. because no, it's not because an object is susceptible to being a support for the afflictions that is necessarily zakche. Because certain phenomena are the opposite of zakche, that are thus zakme, not associated with factors for descent or afflictions. Certain phenomena which are zakme can also be the support for the appearance or emergence of afflictive obscurations.
Yate sachi resigra. Then de la mi pick nyamu legdo. Kunimbo tumbo tamba. Tamba yangres. Penza jik nyembo she poya yamare. Tumbo yangres. Tumsina hakosan. Benata dig de la mina de la teni ko nyamu te meba chagi marda. Oh. Pena der ya sachi doa sachi tendeshi de la mi upi kapsa te yate de yechen bote tamba gres tum te tombo te lat chite lat yate ton de la mi pi nyamo bote tamba tombo te lat.
Donc il faut en fait
it's necessary for there to be a concordance, an accord between the object, which is zakche, and the affliction that arises based on the focus on the object.
Chapashigdo, Pena Lamden Sonda, Same Laden Sonda, meaning as a jella chapashi chugres. Ta samek laden te don ngaza jela chapa nimbote kun tung mares lagres tumbo mares tumba mares lagir tombo telat samek lamden chindo laden tinde si ta ngaza jela chapa chlegida laden na chapa chi chapa le upikas tal yo laden te don ngaza jela chapa nimbote tumba mares lagres tumba mares
et justement.
For example, the truth of the path is zakme, not associated with factors for descent, but it can be the support for the emergence of afflictive obscurations. In this case, there isn't concordance.
Da konda ngamba o ngamba abidama ko sha semchi ti yunchi yores tino penhi jebo cha yores zemar ichamba ngamba dawaser ngamba dawa semchi yore ti khndrewa tadanga zo gen semba doje yo kazu yina bu bena jo ti khndrewa cha yores tino chi son yores pech.
Et justement, pour illustrer
to illustrate this, one of Professor Khenpo Dorje's commentaries on an Abhidharma called the what? The Numpadupa, the compendium of the Abhidharmas. So Professor Khenpo Dorje wrote a commentary on this, and he gave the following example.
라덴 사메토솔라 사파 녀모 레그레 시그레 이나요 네트 말했으라 이랬어.
Et l'exemple
Consider a red hot iron, an insect that attempts to land on this burning hot iron would immediately be incinerated. They could not stay sitting on it. In the same way, afflictive obscurations cannot remain on the truth of the path. In this sense, there is no concordance.
또나 지시나 고아라기 줄었어. 이나요 따뜻이 뇨다 차오 이랬어. 이거는 되게 몸부랬어.
Oui, si on regarde les
If we look at the text, there are many different explanations. There's a lot of debate concerning this question. Khenpo hopes that this example helps to understand the meaning. That's our time. We'll conclude here for today.
선원데 당지 지바니 토나 님베 다나 파신 시가나지 바론도 스빈 솔레 도와 슈